everybody, and welcome. This is actually episode 305 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I am James. I screwed up that intro last week. I was off by one. After 300, you kind of lose track. I'm also fighting a cold, so we'll see what I screw up this week. But here to talk about the Brewers playoff series, unfortunately, we got Ryan and Paul both here. We were like, oh, if they win, maybe we'll do one on Thursday night to quick go through and preview the next series. And if they lose, whatever, we'll get to it. But I feel like it was so disastrous that we kind of need to talk about it now. So we're doing this just in case you're listening to this, a few days from now. We're doing this on Thursday night. So just in case, it's announced on Friday or Saturday that Craig Counsell's leaving or whatever. We don't know that yet. So just keep that in mind while we go through here. But guys, other than the Brewers, how are we doing so far?
I mean, fine. I get over stuff quick. And after they lost game one, I was like not optimistic. So I was already kind of over it. And then it happened and, we're good. The Packers get to beat up on the Raiders, although nothing in the NFL is ever certain because apparently the Bears are beating the ever-living stuffings out of the Commanders right now. So who knows?
Yeah.
Well, that's
Thursday games don't count. Yeah.
Yeah, Thursday games don't count.
That doesn't count. And also it's like the Dick Butkus bump, right? Like they're just...
Oh, right.
Except last time they honored Dick Butkus, they got the ever-loving crap kicked out of him by the Packers on a rainy, windy, I think Halloween night.
It was. Yeah, that's the guy jumping out of the stands and catching that extra point.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, it was.
I believe Edgar Bennett was established as a mutter at that point as well.
He was. Yep. I remember that game was a big deal because it was the first time the Packers played on Monday night in like over 10 years, which now think about that as back when Monday night was the premier game. Yeah. We have so much to talk about. Let's not talk about this stuff.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Like, no. Yeah, you two. Like, James is sick. Paul, you're potentially getting sick.
I'm getting there. Yep. I'm on the road.
I better not get sick because I get too much shit going on to get sick. So none
the Brewers made all of us sick. So, that's a nice little segue here.
They did.
Lots of questions to get to this week. A reminder, question priority. You get that through our Patreon page. So become a patron at patreon.com/MKE tailgate. $2 a month gets you that question priority both here and on the Packers Reporting as Eligible podcast. Paul spent like 90 minutes on that this past week. So he's sick of talking about the Packers. Go listen to that preview if you haven't already. $5 a month gets you that question priority plus additional exclusive content, the Minor League Extra with Ryan and James Anderson from RotoWire, as well as Paul's Packers mini pods.
Which will be one tomorrow. So yeah,
there you go. Looking forward to that as well. The Raiders stink. TLDR there. And even if you're not a patron, you can go support us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you're listening to us right now. Make sure you subscribe, leave a 5-star review, tell your friends about us. We greatly appreciate it. So I guess no way to really mince words about this, and I'll be a man of few words because I can barely talk right now, but that sucked. The playoff series sucked. It was another sucky one. It's another early exit, despite all of the talk about how, the Brewers pitching and defense could make them dangerous in October. We should have known things weren't going to go well, and Bob Nightingale picked them to win the World Series. So that was the kiss of death right there. And I'm sure you've seen it by now, but if you haven't already, just a reminder, if you go back to game 7 of the 2018 NLCS, the Brewers are now 1-9 in their last 10 postseason games, averaging less than 2 runs a game in that stretch. We can all point to that. The lack of power in the offense, failing to drive in the small village of base runners they left on base against the Diamondbacks. That was infuriating. We could point to the pitching not performing up to snuff. Starting with Corbin Burns in game 1. We have got questions about all of that, so I'm just going to jump right into the Patreon questions. You guys, a lot to question after a series like that, and we got damn near 30 questions to get through this week. So let's start it with Brad Westness asking, and I think this is an important thing that came up just before the series, another one of those things that kind of just sucked the life and excitement out of everything. Brad is asking here, do you think the Brandon Woodruff injury news had a kind of chilling effect on the clubhouse, similar to the Hader trade last year? Felt like maybe that is ultimately what led to Burns feeling like he needed to press in game 1 and be too fine, leading to a bunch of walks. Although that could also just be the additional pressure of it being the playoffs in general. So, Paul, that Woodruff news on Monday was a gut punch, and then they had to go out on Tuesday and try to salvage this thing. Do you think that played any role at all?
Yeah, for one thing, I'm sure it wasn't good clubhouse wise, but it wasn't good pitching wise either. And I know it, like, you get Burns starts and you get Freddie starts, and that looks good on paper, and it is good on paper. However, it takes away some of your ability to lean on your bullpen, where you or to have a short leash for Corbin if he's not quite all there, or to have a short leash for anybody really. Like, I think without Woodruff there, you kind of have to get slightly longer starts from somebody, and you can't pull somebody before disaster time, because then you got to go bullpen a whole bunch and put you in a tough position. So it's not a huge effect. Like, it's still good to be able to rely on Burns and Peralta to start games, but there's definitely a strategic deficiency that arises without Woodruff there, even in a 2-game series, even without that backstop there to stop disasters from happening.
Yeah, I want to be able to say that it did, and I'm sure there are real effects for it. They seem to be less resilient, though, even in these situations. So they started off in both games taking an early lead, and then their starters got into trouble sort of quicker than you would expect those guys to get into trouble in both cases, and gave up some runs. In Burns' case, it was the home run ball, which that's what it looks like when Corbin Burns goes bad. That's part of the MO. Freddie, from what I can tell, I was at the game, so I didn't hear the talk on the broadcast. I'm hearing a lot of talk that there was like a velocity drop towards the end of his outing, and I think we have a question that kind of mentions that in here. But as you said, Paul, that's a situation where like they have to try to stick with guys a little bit longer, because you've already at that point you really ran the bullpen out the night before and really used those guys to try to salvage that. And that was because Burns got knocked out in the 5th in that game, and Uribe had to come in to clean up his mess. And I know he was none too happy about it, but like, you gave up 3 dingers. So, you know.
Burns, I think there's a case to be made they could have yanked him a little earlier. If he did not have his good stuff. He had bad Corbin stuff, and he was nibbly, and it was going to be a problem. So I think that's where it really cost him more than anything else.
Yeah, there were some pitches. You look at the ump scorecard, the 2 of the 3 most egregious pitches of the game were him having strikes called for balls. And so like he also had that going for him. It kind of set him up for a little bit of failure. The ultimate result in that wasn't that big, because ultimately those innings they didn't score any runs in those innings, and really none of the big high leverage plays in that. So the game ended up being, I think it was 0.43 to the Diamondbacks. So it wasn't, it was barely.
I don't think they were a big deal. I think we should just blame a lot of blame on Corbin here for, like, he threw gopher balls. Like the last home run that was hit off him in particular was just a meatball up in the zone, and he does that too much and was not on his game on that that night.
Yeah, I think one of the home runs was a pretty legit, like, that was just, the Corbin Carroll one was a pretty.
The change up to Corbin Carroll wasn't a terrible pitch. It was kind of middle low, and Carroll sucks against changeups, but he just kind of guessed right and launched that thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that is we're going to get into that so much in this, but that's a lot of what happens here. So let's save it for some of the other questions, because it just mostly it really just sucked, and it's the emotion of it from a fan perspective, and I have to think from a team perspective, you already started to feel the sense of dread and tightening, and just like, this is not going to go well, is it, once you see Brandon Woodruff crying in a press conference on Monday. I mean, that was absolutely brutal. I watched that, and it was hard not to get choked up yourself watching how much, like, it clearly was tearing him apart, and how bad he felt for the whole situation. I have to imagine, to people he's tight with on the team, and come to understand that that's a lot of people on the team that probably felt pretty crappy for him too. So the whole thing just, it started before the series even started. We started getting the gut punches. So it was 3 very, very bad days to be a Brewer fan.
Yeah, for sure. And, when we recorded the series preview just a few days ago, we were talking about whether being knocked out in the first round again would be considered a failure or not. Ryan, you kind of bristled at at that. And Paul said absolutely it was a failure.
Yep.
So
Huge failure.
I was going to ask, do we still feel the same way?
I do. Yes. I feel
Yeah.
like it confirmed all of my priors exactly. So not only did they failed in very Brewer predictable ways that you could fail. And so, yeah, that was bad. It was not good. Jesse Winker have 2 PAs in this freaking series. That's awful. Don't do that.
So we're going to get into all of that more later. But ultimately, it's 2 baseball games out of 164 played this year that mattered. So I just can't read that much into it.
Still, it's tough when you take in.
They're the ones you're trying hard on, though. Yeah. Like this isn't a game like you're just like punting because you get down by 5 early. This is you pull out all the stops to win it. Like it's not just a normal game.
No, they did, but it's still baseball, and there's still only so much you can do. So, but I mean, we're gonna get into all of this so much. There's so many things about this series that were just maddening.
You could score more than 2 runs in your elimination game. I'll just start there. But that kind of takes us to Mattingly Sideburns with our next Patreon question, who is asking here, which frustrating Brewers offense do you prefer? The 2022 Brewers offense that had power but couldn't hit for contact, or the 2023 Brewers offense that could hit for contact, kind of, but very little power? So, they kind of rehauled things a little bit, at least in the type of profile that they were looking for in hitters recently. So Ryan, I guess, which one is better in your eyes, if you can say one is better?
Yeah, I mean, I was the one who was saying all last year that the offense wasn't as bad as it was being made out to be. They ended up 10th in runs scored. I think this year they ended up 17th. The 2022 Brewers offense was better, and I liked it more. And I think that, part of that is a transition thing that they have going on. We're going to get to that, though. But the 2022 Brewers offense, for its frustrations and all the talk of they're an all-or-nothing, home run or nothing offense, turns out that home runs really, really, really matter in the playoffs. And I've got numbers here, so we'll get into that in one of these next questions. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's the home run part of it really, really does matter. And that was Paul and on the season preview episode, right? That was our primary concern was, does this team hit for enough power?
Be cool, hit dingers. Don't do what this is.
Mm-hmm. And they ended up it's tied for 24th in home runs this year with 165. So yeah.
That kind of brings us to Logan Inderdahl, who's asking, the only thing that I think made the difference in the series is the Brewers' lack of power. We were all here after 2021 when people were clamoring for the team that was too homer dependent, which really irritated me at the time. Now we see the flip side. Who's to blame for this power outage? Too much reliance on Rowdy. He underperformed his 20th percentile ZiPS projection this year. And Brian Anderson, also severe underperformer. Stearns drafting in 18-19 or something else. Obviously, power costs money, but the guys who would have helped, like Brandon Belt or Turner, all signed pretty Brewers realistic deals. So what gives? Paul, what's the main issue here? How did we get here?
I do think you have to really blame the draft of many years ago more than anything else. Especially for the playoffs, because you can blame Rowdy. Rowdy sucked out loud. He was absolutely awful. But they kind of fixed that position. Like Carlos Santana's not great, but he is a colossal upgrade. He's kind of what you expect to get from that position if you're just averagey at it. And so, yeah, like the lack of power is just an all over thing where they didn't develop any, and it's expensive to buy. And so they couldn't buy it, and that's the cause. They needed to do a better job developing in the last 5-6 years, minus the current 2 where you wouldn't have anybody up no matter what. And that's the power outage. They bought what they could on the market cheap, and that ain't power. This is what you get.
Yeah, I think that's pretty right. In fact, you can extend it back to like 14, 15 and up to, I would say 19 is a good place to stop, because starting in 20, you have the Garrett Mitchell, Joey Wiemer draft, and things start on the hitting side start to get rapidly better there. But during that time period, like the best hitter that has been produced in that time period, you have Keston Hiura and you have Bryce Terang.
And Tyrone Taylor.
No, because Tyrone Taylor was drafted in 2012.
All right.
Yeah, no, like he goes so far back. He's
Wow, he goes more than 10 years ago. Okay. I was listening to the microbrew the other day with JR and Kurt, and Kurt just had the stat that like the Brewer hitter development over the last, it was like 10-ish years, has produced 9 WAR for the team, and it's all Tyrone Taylor and Keston here.
Yeah, because
Yeesh.
Keston Hura did have that big rookie year. So there's that time period there. I think you're going to want to draw a pretty hard line at 2020. That's going to be my guess. It might be a year or two later than that, but I think 2020 is when you're going to want to draw a pretty hard line in the sand there. Unless you want to include international players, and then Jefferson Caro would be included in that group as well. So because he was signed in 2019, but that's either here nor there. Yeah, I think the issue, they went away from power and they went towards what everybody says they want, which is we want contact, we want guys who spray the ball around, we want small ball, so we want bunting, we want all of these things. It's what people say they want. And then they got it this year finally. Like the Brewers went away from the home run model, and now everybody's really miserable about it. And I think, like, yeah, we kind of saw that aspect of it coming. I think you could say there is power on the horizon coming. They have guys who are power hitters coming in line here, but they also have some guys that they've brought up who might end up being pretty decent players for them, but aren't probably going to hit for a ton of power, like Sal Frelick and Bryce Terang. Those guys are probably going to be contributors for them, but they're not going to hit for a lot of power. And this seems to have been a David Stearns thing. We have more about this one coming too. I feel like I keep saying that, but we have more about this one coming. Let's go to the next question.
Sure. So Alex Maklicka is asking, from an offensive profile perspective, it certainly appears the front office has been leaning more OBP contact with the drafts of Terang, Mitchell, Frelick, and Black. This series put an exclamation point on the truth that Mark Canha spoke before the postseason, saying, quote, "You have to slug in the playoffs. Arizona outslugged us while we had base runners galore, and look at the result." So, not much of a question there, Ryan, but kind of proves your point that was the profile for a long time that they were drafting.
Yeah, and this is what I want to talk about here, because what happened in this series was wild. So in the series overall, the Brewers hit 309, got on base at a 385 clip, and slugged 382. Obviously, the 382 is problematic there, okay? They hit 1 home run and had 3 extra base hits, famously. The Diamondbacks in the series hit 227, so about 80 points lower. Got on base at a 329 clip, so about 65 points lower. About 55 points lower. And slugged 439, so about 50 points higher. And the Brewers ended up obviously being out homeward 4-1 in the series, and that, I think, pretty much defines this series. Any disagreement on that? That like that homer disparity is basically what made the difference.
That's it. That's 100% it. Yes.
It's what made the difference in the series, and it's not RSP. This is a funny thing. I actually saw somebody in my mentions today, Red Venture, who is pointing all this stuff out. Somebody came to him and was like, the Brewers did not hit 300 with runners in scoring position in this series. And he's like, they were 6 for 20. They hit 300 with runners in scoring position in the series. Problem is that on, I think, 3 of those hits, they didn't score a run.
That's right.
Because
singles that they didn't advance,
various things that happened. Christian Yelich froze too long in the 8th inning on Wednesday. That one comes right to mind because I'm like, he should have scored. I pointed that out on Twitter. Like, Yelich is too good a base runner. He made a couple of base running mistakes in the series that are so it's so uncharacteristic for him. He's one of the best base runners in baseball, just so good at all aspects of it. And to make one the Toot Bland on Tuesday, and then the thing in the 8th inning on Wednesday where he absolutely should have scored. It's like, yeah, okay, the things are going funky when that's happening. The Diamondbacks hit 267, so they hit worse with runners in scoring position. It really comes down to just the home runs. But here is the thing I found today, and it blew my mind. So we talk about power and all of that. I mentioned earlier the Brewers hit 165 home runs this year, and that was tied for 24th in the league. You know where the Diamondbacks were?
I'm guessing lower.
They were 166 home runs, and that was tied for 22nd in the league. They were hit one more home run than the Brewers in the regular season. So it wasn't like the power. And I this came to my mind. I checked it when I got to work because I was listening to a podcast because I'm a masochist previewing postseason. I was listening to the Baseball Prospectus one, and they brought up, the Diamondbacks don't hit for any power. And I'm like, yeah, thanks guys. You're torturing me on my way to work.
Well, it's
the
not like
morning
4
after.
home runs over 2 games is actually that many home runs.
No,
it's
not
just
particularly.
more than one.
Right. Yeah, it's more. It's more than the one that the Brewers hit, and
like over any 2-game series, you can find lots of games where you'll combo to hit 7 or 8 or 9 home runs.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that checks out.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like you can't really say that the Diamondbacks like won this series because they're a better power hitting team than the Brewers, right? They aren't really a better power hitting team. They just hit for more power than the Brewers, not because they were a better power hitting team. Both were pretty bad on that score. They were in the bottom third of baseball in terms of hitting home runs. So like that one just that got me. I don't know if you guys saw the Tyrone Taylor. That will be the indelible image from this playoff run for me, is the much superannuated Evan Longoria stretching out and snagging
that play,
snagging Tyrone Taylor's home run. I don't know if you guys saw my tweet on this. The
line drive, not a home run.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the line drive down the third baseline. Yeah, sorry, did I say home run? I probably said home run. Yeah, the Brewers' win expectancy when Tyrone Taylor strode to the plate at that point was 65 point something. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I can't find my tweet, but was 65 point something. When he hit that double play, it was 34 point something.
Yep.
So it was a 30-point drop in win expectancy on one play. And
his expected batting average on that contact was 707. So
I think it's 770, but yeah,
770, whatever.
Yeah,
it was high.
Yeah, I put that in the tweet too because it's like
right.
That is some Bleacher Nation stuff. And Steve right now is yelling at me at the. You can count on it for that because that's some Bleacher Nation stuff. But sometimes, yeah, you just have to go. Okay, that was a ball that almost always results in not just a single and a couple runs, but probably extra bases, and then quite possibly a really big inning that you have at that point. And so the series, that was the swing point of the entire series. I think by analytics, by any measure you want to look at, like that is the swing moment of the series, and it sucked. It sucked so bad.
All right, moving on. One more question or a couple about the power situation here. LaCroix Suitcase asking, effectively Wild recently mentioned that there may be a slight advantage in the postseason for teams that are more reliant on power. Are there things the Brewers could be doing to set themselves up better for the postseason? Although it is said the playoffs are a crapshoot, it seems that there are some teams that are more consistent winners. Help give me some optimism because I don't see how their playoff offensive malaise ends. So I guess let's start there, Paul. Obviously we saw that and we kind of talked about it a little bit, right? That you need power and bullpen, and that's kind of the new secret sauce here.
It's kind of the old secret sauce, ironically, but mostly the bullpen and something else. But I think the Brewers are sort of especially susceptible to this because they were really good at preventing runs, but a huge part of that was their defense, not their pitching. Like they had a great team ERA, but their DRA wasn't all that spectacular. And when you hit dingers, you take the defense out of play, and when you don't hit dingers, you bring the defense into play. And that's what happened more or less in this series. Is Corbin is especially home run prone, and they knocked a whole bunch of balls over the fence that the defense didn't have anything to do with, and that was enough. And Brewers couldn't return in kind. So power does help. It helps by taking a lot of things out of play. It helps by allowing you to score without stringing hits together. It helps by allowing you to score with just a couple of hits, and if your pitching can hold up, that's enough. And the Brewers are kind of the opposite of that. They rely heavily on balls in play to create outs. They rely heavily on balls in play to score runs. And generally speaking, in the playoffs, you're going to run into teams that are good at countering those things as well. So, getting more power heavy would just help take some of that out of commission. And pitching wise, they're still a good pitching team. It's good to be good defensively. I just think they just kind of ran. I don't know if it's bad luck, but I do think it's one of the places where Woodruff actually does hurt them a little bit, and where when Burns stuff's not there, you can't go get him. Like that's the main thing there. It took away an option that maybe would have played a little better.
Yeah, with you down the line on that. We can keep going here.
All right. Well, when I said we'll see what I screw up because I'm not, clear-minded and battling this cold, Alex Maklica did have a question that I just missed in the shuffling of the rundown here. So Alex says, my question is, how would you go about finding more balance in the lineup as GM, since it seems we have overcorrected from a homer-happy organization just a few years ago, trade from our glutton of OBP guys for a power profile, adjust draft strategy, free agency. I don't think we can expect this crop of young guys, although talented, to project into much power increases. What would you suggest the Brewers do? So, Ryan, I know in the past you've talked about how the Brewers kind of drafted some of these guys and hoped to kind of coach them up on power just because they hadn't had success really in coaching up contact on power guys. So, is that still what you would do, or is there a shift that needs to happen here?
Well, the shift has already happened. So the Brewers, as there's such a lag time on these things, that the shift here has already happened. But they did seem to have some success. The prime example of them having success with a guy who was a contact first guy that they thought they could coach up power on is Tyler Black. And Tyler Black looks like he's going to hit for a significant amount of at least doubles, triples power. The home run power may be more in the 10 to 20 range, depending on the ball. But that part of it, he's probably going to be the biggest success story there. Maybe Garrett Mitchell. Garrett Mitchell might also be a guy like that who didn't hit for much power in college, but had raw power in his swing, and they thought they could maybe coach that up. So those are the two guys that you would hope from there. But they've already changed this philosophy. They went after power like crazy in this draft, guys. They went after Brock Wilken. Brock Wilken is a power first over everything guy, and they spent the 18th pick in the draft on him. And they also went after power guys in Cooper Pratt and Batanti as well. Those guys are power guys. Bove is more of kind of what they had been doing. But of the the four hitters that they gave over $1 million bonuses to, I'd say three of them are pretty, more power hitter than anything else. So they've already adjusted that draft strategy. So from that perspective, that's already happening. I think the other thing you have to remember is that I already mentioned Tyler Black, but we have a really good power hitter, one of the best prospects in the game, and he's sitting in AAA, and we'll see how quickly he makes it to the roster next year. But Jackson Chourio will help this. If he doesn't bust, if he turns into the close to the player we think he can be, he helps this a lot. So you're going to get more power up the middle there. Jefferson Caro, I think, helps this. Once I absolutely love, I think he's like the platonic ideal of a backup catcher. But once you replace Victor Caratini with Jefferson Caro, which I think happens throughout the course of the next either year or 2 years, and you get into a rotation between those two, between Contreras and Caro, you get more power there as well. So I think there is power coming. And then it's, also the kids behind them with Pratt and Batanti. We'll see where they end up, but there's power there potentially too. So from the in-house strategy, that's where you're talking about. I spent a little bit of time tonight looking over the outside things, and so we can look a little bit forward here, looking at what's available outside. Power this winter is really, really tough to come by on the free agent market. It's going to be flawed. You're going to end up with power hitters that you hate because they're home run or nothing, or they're guys who hit home runs, strike out a lot, and take a lot of walks. And hit for a low average.
Bring me that.
Yeah, 3 true outcomes. Well, everybody says they hate that. I hear that so much.
That's not true. We have to stop saying that. That's not true.
A lot of people hate that, Paul.
All my friends love 3 true outcomes, and I don't care what people who call into talk radio say. So, I just heartily disagree with that as a concept.
I mean, all of my coworkers that I talk to about this stuff hate that. So it's absolutely despise the all or nothing swinging for the fences approach. They were so happy this spring when the Brewers were that initial run where it was they're hitting for contact, they're spraying the ball around. Absolutely adored it. So it's out there. I don't think it's our listeners so much, but I'm sure our listeners could go, yeah, we hear this from our friends too. So because if that's you listening to this podcast, probably it's probably not something that you do too often. Like people that really love, classic old school baseball, we're probably not the podcast for those people, I would think, because it tends not to be us.
Probably
we
not.
welcome all listeners, for the record.
Sure,
Don't let
I'm just
Ryan
saying.
tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm just saying they probably don't like us that much because
I'll just say
we have a very strong opinion about this stuff.
I'm the most likely person to complain about the Brewers being cheap, despite their payroll being, like 10 spots above their market level. And this is where it shows up. It's in them hunting for the same kind of bargains that the market is giving you. And whatever, they can do it for contact, that's fine. But like everybody who they did sign was either spaghetti or was like a medium power contact person or something along those lines. You had to pay for power. And they're not balanced because they won't pay for a skill that is highly valued by everybody else. So that's where it shows up. And that's why they don't have a big bopper or two on the team.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. It has gotten a lot more expensive to buy power.
Yeah, it has.
When our formative years as doing analysis sort of things, we grew up with power was the thing everybody had because we were in the steroid era, and power was the thing you could get, and pitching was the hard thing to find. Mm-hmm. And that has completely changed around now. Guys who could hit for power and do anything else is like the scarcity on the market.
Yeah, it's just not there.
Right. And like what people want is they want a lineup full of guys who hit 300, get on base at a 400 clip, and slug 500 and don't strike out. Like that seems to be sort of the ideal of what it is. And those players, we talked about this earlier in the year, guys who put up a 900 OPS in baseball in 2003, there were 31 of them. This year, last I looked, there were 7. Power and hitting all around prowess just isn't what it used to be because the pitchers have just gotten too good. I mean, pitching, we've talked about this so much. Pitching has gotten so good. And so it's created the scarcity in the market for power. And so you have to find ways to get it. The Brewers have been, to be fair to them, until they made this shift this year towards the younger players that they'd been drafting, they had done a really good job of finding power in cheap corner guys for the entire Stearns tenure. We've gone down that list of guys, but you can go back to, Chris Carter, through Hunter Renfroe. All these guys hit for a lot of power.
Names Aguiar. Yep.
True. Travis Shaw. I mean, we could go on and on and on up to Rowdy and Willie Adames and these guys who gave them 30 home run seasons last year. And it all kind of didn't work this year. Everything that could go bad power wise did kind of go bad for them this year. I think they will probably tack back somewhat on that this year in the winter, but it's going to be hard. I was looking around. I think it's going to have to come in a trade. I think if you want to get like a power bat, it's going to have to come in a trade, and that's going to be real expensive. So maybe that's a guy that you like look for a thing when you're trading Burns. If you trade Burns, you try to get a power bat for somewhere. But I think really, it's the next generation of power for this team, homegrown wise, like is on they're in the mid to high minors. Brock Wilken ended this year AA, guys. So like he's coming relatively quickly, but they're not here yet. So I think some stopgaps, some bridge guys to get them there. I'm having trouble imagining where it's going to be, except probably at DH. So maybe you trade for Brent Rooker.
Hey, Brent Rooker, Twitter superstar over the weekend, by the way.
Yes,
so
he was.
That was fun. All right. I guess speaking of expensive trades, Jay Google asking, who's more to blame in this series, the offense or the pitching? Also, this is it for Burns, right? Gives the Brewers an excuse to move him. So, Paul, let's start with you. Was it the offense or the pitching? More to blame? Kind of, if you ask me, everything. But is there one more than the other? And is this Burns' last thing?
I think everything, but I would lean a little towards hitting, despite all of their singles that led to nothing, being not completely pointless. It's just kind of their MO, and when their pitching has an off day, which Burns' start was not great, but it wasn't terrible. like it shouldn't doom you if he does that, and it does. And so I still blame the offense. It like a good professional playoff offense should be able to get you like 5-6 runs, and that wouldn't have been enough every time, but keep you in the game, and then your bullpen management changes as well. So I lean offense here. Pitching was not great either. Had a whole bunch of problems too. A lot went wrong in this, but I think primarily it's their fault.
Yeah, I think it's both of them kind of share the blame equally in terms of like what the results were on the field, because I don't think preventing 11 or scoring, what did they score, 5? Preventing 11 or scoring 5, either of those numbers is good enough.
Yeah, it's not.
I would say that the pitching kind of deserved their hits and what they took more than the hitting did. I think the hitting did enough good things that had things broken a different way, they would have scored more runs. Taron Taylor's ball should have gotten through. They should have had a few more runs there. Like there were a bunch of things like that should have gone their way that didn't. So from that perspective, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put more of the blame on the pitching because, one, they're the stars. They're the good players, much more so than the hitters. And they were just, really, really, bad in a lot of ways that they shouldn't have been. I mean, look, you had 6 runs given up on Tuesday, and 4 of them were given up by Burns, and 2 of them were given up by Devin Williams. They're the 2 best pitchers on the team. That's not a recipe.
They're not. Devin Williams is. Corbin's not.
You don't think Corbin, I mean...
Not this year. Not like a year and a half now. No, I don't think so. I think Woodruff's better than he is when he's healthy.
But Woodruff has also missed a ton of time. So
okay.
So
fine.
Yeah, I mean, like you could make that case, but okay, so it's 2 of the 3 best
Freddie
pitchers
was
on the
much
team.
better than Corbin this year too.
Freddie closed more steadily.
Well, I think by DRA, if you look, I think Freddie actually outperformed Corbin.
Okay.
Somebody can look that up when I stall here. But yeah, it's just everything had to be better. That's kind of the gist here. Let's continue the Corbin Burns talk. Tom Haight asking, do the Brewers keep Burns until his arbitration hearing so they could just blame him for not winning their wild card series, or is he gone before then? How did the vibes around this team get so bad in only 2 days? We were riding high on Sunday.
That is so good.
Yeah. I guess, Ryan, if he's traded, is he traded before the ARB hearing in February, I assume?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he was going to get traded before the ARB hearing. Before any of this occurred, I think that was pretty likely all along. So, and maybe that's more wish casting on my part, just because I don't want to live through that again.
Are you kidding? I want to be in it. I want front row seats to it.
You got to take notes at the arbitration hearing.
A rare ARB hearing where I think nobody will actually care about anybody else's feelings. So yeah, I'm all in on being into that puppy. But I think he gets traded before it. I think there's a good chance that wherever he winds up will want to talk extension and not ARB and buy stuff out. So I think that happens.
Yeah, for people that have been following on Twitter, the secret trade that I'm looking at, you can go look him up, Cutter Crawford from the Boston Red Sox. If you get the Red Sox feeling like they need to make a move, a splash, do something, Cutter Crawford was a pretty solid pitcher this year for the Red Sox and still has like 4 years of control. He could give you probably 80 to 90% of what Burns can give you, and you'd probably get pieces in addition to him as well. So if you want to look at a thing like that, I slammed the guy when he initially proposed that trade, but I've come way around on that. Like the idea that Cutter Crawford could be the centerpiece for a Corbin Burns trade. Yeah. I'll take that.
So, I've got your ranks here. Freddie finished 5th on the team in DRA. Brendan Woodruff finished 7th on the team in DRA, and Corbin finished 12th on the team in DRA.
Whoa. How you mean so you're including all the relievers in there?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
So who was first? Devin?
Trevor McGill.
Okay.
Huh. Interesting.
Devin is actually tied with him. And then it's Piamps, Milner, Peralta. Actually, then it's Bukowskis. Good for him. Then it's Woodruff, Piguero, JC Mejia. Then Then Caleb Bueshley sneaking in just ahead of Abner Uribe and Corbin Burns with his one appearance.
Huh.
Wow. Okay,
That's fun.
that reinforces the thing. And also, when it comes time to trade Corbin Burns this winter, understand that other teams are going to know all of that.
Yeah,
And
Burns, by the way, just a hair ahead of Adrian Hauser.
See, yeah, not a great year. The home runs will hurt you there.
Yep.
For sure. All right. Next question comes from Made Wiley asking, is hitting and bullpen performance a better playoff predictor of success than starting pitching? Paul, we kind of touched on this. Do you think so?
I actually, I'm not sure I would go that far. Starting pitching is really useful. If your starting pitching is terrible, especially in the longer series, you're going to run out of gas. So you need to be good at all of this, which is one of the reasons why the teams with a whole bunch of good players do tend to do better in the playoffs. But I think the short series, you can spam your bullpen a little bit more, and the hitting does matter. So maybe a little bit more in the 2-game series, because if you're top heavy, I mean, Arizona's top heavy, like they're not going to be as good in the next round because they won't be able to lean on Gallen and the other guy whose name I don't care about for as many innings. So, yeah, I think overall, like World Series predictor, not really. Maybe first round predictor a little bit, but yeah, you just need to be good at everything.
Yeah, but I would take this order that he puts it out there. I would say hitting specifically for power is the first thing, bullpen for performance, and then starting pitching, just because I think there's enough ways to get around starting pitching. You can work your way around it in a lot of games in the playoffs if you have enough bullpen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the further you go, though, the worse that gets for you.
Yeah, there's a shelf life on it. You also just need like somebody to get like hot, who's maybe not like a great pitcher, but just pitches like it for the duration of the playoffs. That always helps too. So,
yeah, and then the Brewers signed that guy to a 5-year, $80 million contract.
The guy who gets hot in the playoffs?
Yeah, that was a Jeff Suppan reference, and I don't remember what we actually signed it for. But just consider it, adjusting for inflation.
That's
Jeff Suppan adjusted for inflation. Yes.
Yeah, it was 4 for 40. But yeah, actually, you know what?
That's probably ballpark, right?
It's probably in the 60, 70 at this point at least. So yeah, okay. All right. Giddy up.
All right, let's move on to the Jesse Winker portion of this podcast. Patrick Detmer asking, which of these is the more questionable decision? The director of the 1994 film Little Big League, including a scene where a 12-year-old watches an X-rated video, night nurses from Jersey in a movie meant for children, or the Brewers including Jesse Winker on their playoff roster and giving him multiple at-bats. So, I was prepared to say, Jesse Winker was only 2 plate appearances on the entire series. How much could that possibly matter? And Paul, I was woefully wrong.
Yeah, it's 2. Because the first one, you could conceivably make both clean and funny if treated properly. Whereas the second one has no justification whatsoever. Jesse Winker has been terrible for a long time, hasn't played Major League Baseball for many months, and has no positional value. It isn't good at the prescribed thing, and I don't know, is he a better hitter even against platoon side guys than Brian Anderson would have been? Not really. So there you go, just terrible.
Brian Anderson had reverse platoon splits.
That's correct. Yes, I looked this up. He was probably a better hitter than Jesse Winker against same side versus platoon. That is correct. Yeah, Keston also would have been just ridiculous, just stupid. I assume Jesse Winker has some kind of blackmail on Brian Anderson. That is my assumption, because I don't know how else this happens.
So it happens because he hit really well in AAA for a few weeks.
Oh yeah, Keston here hit really well in AAA for like 2 years, and is 26 years old and not a washed up loser.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jesse Winker's 29, but whatever. Anyways, so we should have
Jesse Winker's obliques are 55, so
that probably does seem true at this point. So, but anyways, we probably should have seen this coming. We didn't talk about Jesse Winker when we ran through our roster possibilities last weekend.
Yeah, because it was such a stupid idea.
We didn't talk about it because he hadn't been on the big league roster, and we assumed that because he wasn't on the big league roster for the last 3 months or whatever, that they wouldn't take somebody who had been down in the minors and just put him on the big league roster. We assumed that if you were going to do something like that, you would have done it beforehand.
Yes, we assumed that they would act
I
rationally,
assume that
and
the
they
team
did
is
not.
not run by complete morons. I assume that there is one moron who makes bad decisions once in a while, but is not in charge of playoff decisions.
So, but friend of the podcast, Kurt Hogue, had been calling this all along. He stuck with it through multiple weeks, saying he thought that this was going to happen, that they were going to do this. So we should have talked about it because it was predicted by somebody who knows what's going on that it could potentially happen, but we missed that because it didn't. So because they didn't call him up, so he hadn't been there. The logic of the decision for why they were doing it was that despite all of the Jesse Winker flaws, he is still a guy who gets on base at a pretty good clip,
but not as well as Brian Anderson.
He was 320 this year. What was Brian Anderson?
If you look at platoon splits, which I assume is the only instance when he would play it because you're pinch hitting. Hold on, I got him pulled up. Do I have his career? What,
his career or year? Well, because I'm going with Jesse Winker's year, so we should go Brian Anderson year, right?
All right, hold on. I was going for sample size.
Fair.
Not as good. Okay, so yeah, he's got him there.
Right. So basically the thought process was here is that Jesse Winker will make a pitcher throw pitches. He's going to make potentially some of these wild Diamondbacks relievers throw him strikes and put the ball in the strike zone. And what happened? He didn't. He just They
threw fastballs in the strike zone, and he looked like somebody who hadn't seen that in 3 months.
Yeah.
Well, he elevated on the third. He struck out of the strike zone on the third pitch I thought 2 of the pitches were out of the strike zone on Tuesday night.
He couldn't catch up to anything, though, I guess is sort of my point. He looked like a guy who had not seen that level.
Yeah, I feel like they should have seen him in a cage and been like, nope, not doing that.
The bat speed didn't work.
Go away. Yeah.
The interesting part for me is it didn't work and it looked bad. Like the vibe, or like the look of it was really bad. And the oblique thing with like Craig Counsell coming out after 2 strikes, I was shocked that he batted on Wednesday. That was the really weird part. I honestly couldn't figure out why people were booing because I was in really crappy seats on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out why people were booing.
It was 321 to 316. I stopped looking because I forgot how close it actually was. So Brian Anderson at a 3, that's not even good. Like 321 OBP isn't even good. Like
I think that it's around the league average this year. I think the league average is right around 320.
All right.
I mean, and part of the deal is here, you're not going to, because it actually wasn't Brian Anderson who would have been in his place. It would have been Rowdy.
Oh, no. I'm just saying.
It would have been, you would have pinch hit Rowdy in that situation instead. And it was like, well,
or you could have gotten a better player to be there.
Well, no, because this offense doesn't have a bunch of surplus good players. It barely has enough decent players to put in the starting lineup.
Maybe if it wouldn't hold weird grudges against better players, it would have had better players.
Yeah, I mean that's the callback here. So that's the weird part of it. I just like and ultimately the this is 2 outs out of 54 outs in the series, and it's such a small part of the overall picture. The booing on Wednesday night. So people were booing him when he was in the on deck circle, and I couldn't figure that out. And then when he
you couldn't figure that out. Well, I would have been booing him in the on deck circle.
I couldn't see him.
I would have been booing the people who put him in the on deck circle. But it's hard to tell.
I literally couldn't see who was in the on deck circle. I didn't know that was happening. It was from the other side of the stadium. I was literally looking at the front of it. I didn't see who it was. And then when they announced him and people really booed, I don't know how clearly that came through on.
According to my brother, it was very clear
on the broadcast.
Yeah. It was extra clear after the out. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So it was the loudest I've ever heard a Brewers player booed at home in my life. I never remember hearing boos like that for a Brewers player. That was wild. That was Yadier Molina is coming up to bat in a game with a lot of fans in the stands level of booing. that was loud booing. So I wasn't sure how clearly it came through on the broadcast, but yeah, that was
with ESPN's mixing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was really, really wild. And I definitely don't condone that. So that's not. I don't believe in booing, especially preemptively, your home players in like big situations. But people had to vent the spleens apparently. So like, but that was absolutely wild. I did not. I've never seen anything quite like that. That was flooring to me.
I'm not going to tell anyone how to fan. I'll just say
Yeah, I would have
bad
booed
for Jesse.
That's
Yeah,
I
I
boo
felt
stupid
bad
crap.
for him.
When my team does stupid garbage, I boo it, and they did, so they deserved it.
I mean, the thing with him being put back out there, it raises all kinds of. Well, actually, let's go to the next questions because
not his fault.
It raises all kinds of
Anyway.
questions. Yeah.
Well, one of those questions, Brew Crew fan in California asking, pick your poison, Jesse Winker as pinch hitter or Mark Kotsay in center field. Yeesh. That was at least on the road, Ryan.
Yeah. No, but these both are going to go down in playoff lore as meaning a lot more and having a lot more impact than they actually did. The Kotsay one has lived in infamy for 13, 12 years now,
right.
and it really didn't make much of a difference in the full
did.
analysis. Well, no, because he also hit a home run that game. So.
Yes, but you could have taken him out after he hit the home run, because then you got what you wanted out of center fielder Mark Kotsay, and you could have put in one of the two awesome center fielders on the team in center field.
I hope we are still around doing a podcast 12 years from now to be able to rehash the Jesse Winker thing like we are now rehashing the Mark Kotsay thing, because this is one of those things that's going to live in infamy forever.
The Kotsay thing's worse because the gamble paid off, but then he stuck with it too long. Like you did it. Like you got offense, and the offense happened, and it worked, and then you just pull him. Like put Gomez or Morgan in, and then you win. Yay! But you didn't. So. That one sucks, but Winker's worse because there's not really a good excuse for it. It's just dumb, just stupid. Just don't. Bad decision, no reason for it, no strategic benefit to it, just stupid.
All right, well, speaking of Jesse Winker, that kind of leads us into our Craig Counsell decisions portion of this series review. Nick Vollendorf asking, not our Craig Timber Counsell. He seemed checked out to me. For example, why did he let Winker on the roster, and why did he use him a second time? Same action, hoping for a different result. In game 2, bottom of the 8th with bases loaded, they brought in Sal Frank, a lefty, to face Frelick. Craig did not answer by pinch hitting a right-handed batter. Was he trying to make sure he doesn't get manager of the year? Is he still mad about Brian Anderson? Or was he distracted thinking about his next gig, even though he claimed he wasn't? So, Paul, not Craig's finest series.
Not great. I do feel like he's only partially in charge of the roster, and I'd love to hear all of the back end discussions on who should be on it and who shouldn't, and who Craig wanted and who he didn't, because we know that there is friction there from the Brian Anderson situation. And it's not like they had a bench of murderers row hitters on there either. So to the extent that he didn't pick it, he was a little hamstrung by his options too. So I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of little things that he did kind of wrong. And to the extent that he was in charge of the roster decision, there's a lot that he did wrong. But I don't feel like he was horrible, just a little slow on a couple things, but also somewhat rational in reacting to the situation he found himself in without Woodruff and without a bench that could actually hit very well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate up and down. I would point out
Blake Perkins and Joey Weimer aren't going to do anything either. So
yeah, and that was kind of my point about the Jesse Winker thing, was like it wasn't like they were leaving guys who were excellent hitters on the bench here. You have a guy who had played like a little bit since April and hadn't really shown anything in AAA. In Garrett Mitchell, it was a surprise he was left off the roster. We thought he was going to be on there, but like, I can't say he was going to do any better in that situation than Jesse Winker did. Also, one thing
I wouldn't say that there's a lot of evidence that he would have done better than Jesse Winker there, but okay.
Well, no, I mean, just like the result was like, you're probably going to make it out there. Most players are going to make it out like 2/3 of the time. So like, chances are good you're going to get outs from whoever you put up there, especially with the pinch hitting disadvantage. That's the other thing is there's a known disadvantage to pinch hitting. And especially young players tend to struggle with pinch hitting coming in cold to a game. The numbers over like baseball history have always shown like there's a pinch hitting disadvantage, but none of that doesn't really matter. I wanted to mention Sal Frelick.
Was better against righties this year. Just putting that on the record. 328 OBP, 417 slugging for Garrett.
For Garrett Mitchell in his
this year
70 up. How many plate appearances does he have this year?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
A winkerish amount.
Sure. No, the Sal Frelick thing. He doesn't have much of a platoon split. He's not a guy who really struggles with lefties, so I think that probably went into the computation. I probably would have brought in Weimer for him in at least some of these situations, especially that last one. But again, Joey Weimer hadn't been playing in the big leagues for a month either. So like, I don't know that he was going to be. Yeah, because Weimer was sent out at the beginning of September-ish. So I don't know that he like, hey kid, here's your first playoff plate appearance. You're trying to save us. I don't know how much better that necessarily would have gone than what Sal Frelick gave them either. So I think it was just in a tough situation. The biggest thing here I wonder about is Counsell's decision. I've been thinking about this a lot today. Counsell's decision to hit Winker a second time after the first one is really, really interesting to me, and I don't know what to read into it. I wonder if we're going to hear more about this later, because on the surface it would suggest that Craig Counsell was on board with Jesse Winker being in the role that he's in and didn't have a problem with it, and because if he didn't want to use him in that situation, then he wouldn't have pinch hit him. So the fact that he used him that second day, knowing that what was going to happen was not going to be good, in terms of reaction and whatever, if it didn't work, especially like it was going to be hugely problematic, makes you wonder all sorts of things about what's going on with Craig Counsell right now. Did he have that much faith in Winker? Did he really believe in him? Or was he making a point? That was is that in the next question? Or was in this question, actually?
There is.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of.
Was he trolling? Yes, that was part of the question.
Yeah, that was part of it. Like, was he trolling the front office? Was he, is there something going on here? It will be interesting to see. I think no matter what the truth is, I think it's going to be spun that way, that this was on the front office. But Craig Counsell ultimately is the one who put him into the game. Matt Arnold didn't put him into the game. So the reasoning for that is going to be interesting to find out. And I'm on the record as saying this is not that big a deal. So it is going to be interesting to follow like what the fallout of this is, because the reaction was just so loud. I just kind of can't get over that.
Next question comes from you're either a smart fella or a fart smella. And this is kind of a long one, touching on some things that we had talked about, but saying maybe it's just a coincidence given all the uncertainty with Craig's future. And I don't want to just be calling decisions bad in hindsight after they didn't work, but some of the managerial decisions made by Craig during these two wildcard games seem downright bizarre for a guy who has shown himself to be such a good manager over the years. Not pinch hitting for Terang in a couple of spots, same with Frelick against the left-hander in the 8th inning of Game 2. It just seems like in the past, Craig has been more proactive with pinch hitters in spots like these. Honorable mention, maybe even leaving Freddie in too long given his velocity dropping. Granted, I get wanting to squeeze a little bit extra out of the starter if possible, with the bullpen having been already used the way it had. If I didn't know better, it almost feels like Craig knows he's gone and was kind of mailing it in. Is that an absurd notion? Is it dumb but kind of fun to imagine a scenario in which Craig pinch hit Winker twice as if to give one last middle finger to the front office, saying, well, this is who you gave me to go out there. Enjoy. Speculate away about any potential rifts between Craig and the front office. Alternatively to Craig Counsell just mailing it in, is there any credibility to the idea I've heard among some fans that Craig is a good regular season manager but isn't a good postseason manager, whatever that means? So a lot there, Paul, some of which we talked about already, but speculate away, as they say.
Yeah, I don't think he called like an egregious series at all. I do think it is noteworthy that we had like more bunts than I would like in a postseason series. At least Yelich reached, but yeah, Terang's a problem and should probably be treated like a defensive replacement to some extent as well. And if an opportunity comes up, you should probably nab him out of there, even though he is a good defensive player. But like just the lineup that they had and the way that pitching broke down, I don't think that Craig was especially poor in the series, really, and couldn't have done too much to fix it without a lot of foreknowledge. So there's that. And I think he's a perfectly fine postseason manager. I think that's nonsense. And most of the issues they have in the postseason have to do with just imperfect rosters. So, but the Winker thing was weird. The last one might have been sticking it to people. I think it's at least possible.
Yeah, we'll see. If he leaves, that is certainly going to be a thing people say, whether or not there's any truth to it. So we'll have to see if there ever ends up being some sort of resolution to that whole thing. But the Occam's razor would suggest that Craig Counsell thinks that Jesse Winker was a better play in that position than everybody else did. So like that's what, the least conspiratorial thinking would be, is just like he thought he was good option and he went with him. Agree with you on the rest of the stuff down the line. Like he's a good manager. A lot of the people that dislike Craig Counsell want him to bunt like it's 1985 or God, like it's 1920 again, pre the Chapman incident. So I think a lot of people that want that are never going to be happy with any manager that manages in a modern way, and manages in a way that they're not bunting a lot. So the bunts in this series, so that both of the ones that they had two guys reach on bunts, right? Didn't Terang also reach on a bunt hit?
Maybe. I know Yelly did. I might have been putting kids to bed when that happened.
Okay. So yeah, the thing about bunt hits is they're not bunts. You're not sacrificing. Yeah. And in those situations, like Yelich was clearly trying to get on base, and
that was fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a good call. That's what they needed at that point was base runners, and he got on base, and he should have scored on that. Yeah. Whatever. Next question.
PJ Wessel is asking, Bucks podcast when? Thanks again for another great set of episodes to follow the season with. And then manager salaries don't count towards the luxury tax. So do you make Counsell the highest paid manager this offseason if he's committed to being a manager somewhere? Ryan, you're nodding your head. Yes.
Yeah, and I think if this is about money, I think it gets done. If this is Craig trying to get the maximum amount of money out of Mark Attanasio, I think it gets done, because we're not talking about that much money. It's just not. Craig is already making like 3.5, and the best managers in baseball are making like 7 or 8. I think the one concern that you could potentially have here is that, okay, if Craig gets this money, then what do you have to give to Matt Arnold so that he's not making 3 times less than the manager, because that creates a power imbalance, and that creates, a potential issue there. And then if you give the bump to Matt Arnold, how much do you have to pay his assistants? And there's that whole wage scale thing that would be the only conceivable reason that you would not do this. And I don't think it even applies, because Craig seems like a sui generis situation. Like, he is Mr. Milwaukee baseball, and beyond Euchre, obviously, but Euchre may or may not even be in the booth next year. We've heard, there's been talk that this may have been his last run through. So yeah, I think Counsell is like a special situation, and you would do that for him, to keep him around, because he is one of the best managers in the game. So if that's why Counsell is holding out, if that's why he's not done an extension yet, I believe that gets done. If he leaves, I think it's for something else. I think there's a different reason for it.
Yeah, you obviously pay him. It's free wins, even at the highest paid manager in baseball. He's much better than everyone else is, and it's just an easy calculation to do.
Luke Zimmerman asking another Counsell question here, saying, thanks for the coverage this season and in the past. Looking forward to 2024, though a bit earlier than desired with the first round playoff exit. Assuming Counsell is not returning to manage, who can be identified as potential replacement candidates, if not names? What sort of profiles? So, Paul, do you have anything in mind for that one?
No, I don't. I got to see who else is available, and I don't even want like any established manager that is out. Like I don't want Kapler. I don't like him. I would want to adhere to the profile that Counsell brings as closely as possible. In my interview is, can you relate to players? Do you understand what the front office wants to do? Are you capable of implementing what the front office wants to do without pissing off your players? That's all I want.
Literally, those first two items, and the second one is kind of related to them, or the third one, I should say, were exactly what I was going to say. Like, that's exactly it. It is in that order. Getting along with your players and getting along with the front office and, like, having a simpatico with those things, those are my qualifications. That's what I want more than anything. That's it.
In terms of actual names, I don't know if we've heard a ton. We just know, like, Carlos Villanueva kind of maybe floated out there as a future manager someday. They seem to think he's sort of in the Counsell mold of, obviously former Brewers player, gets along with a lot of guys, can maybe be that messenger relayer too. So we'll see what happens if that happens. Archduke Aslatam or Darth Paul, I can't decide. Been a while since we've had a question from that one. Asking earlier today, Robert Murray reported on his podcast that someone close to Craig Counsell said he would have a hard time turning down a pile of cash to be the Mets manager. And then Billy Epler, quote unquote, resigned as GM. Should we be concerned that there could be a real brain drain on the Brewers in the front office? So, Paul, aside from Craig Counsell, anybody else maybe heading to New York?
It's definitely a worry. When this kind of thing happens, a lot of good assistants will choose to go get more money, go to the guy they're familiar with, go to the bigger market with more resources where you can maybe, contribute to buying some of the guys you really want. So yeah, it's a concern. It's worth keeping an eye on. I won't pretend to know who's valuable in the Brewer front office other than Arnold. I'm sure he has, loyal people who will stick around. But anytime there is a sea change like this, you are definitely at risk for losing key people.
Yep, that it definitely is, because those are the people that Stearns is, one, most familiar with, and two, he hired him once already or was involved in the hiring process for a lot of these people already. So he clearly liked them enough to hire them once. So I would say that the counter to that, and the reason why you shouldn't worry that much, is David Stearns has had a year to essentially assemble his front office, or what he wants for his front office, because he wasn't doing anything else for the last 12 months. So he literally could basically just be going through his contacts and deciding what he wants and what he doesn't, talking to friends within the game, finding out who is good, who's this good young up and coming analyst in, whoever knows. So he's going to have his pick of a lot of organizations, because there are a lot of smart organizations in baseball now, so he's going to be able to pick from a wide pool. He doesn't just have to go to the Milwaukee pool, but it would be the pool he's most familiar with. So, and if he is he bearing a grudge or something and wants to take people away? I don't know. I don't know if that's what Stearns is all about, but we'll see. So I think there will inevitably be people that will go from the Brewers to the Mets, but I don't think it's going to be like some sort of Pied Piper situation.
All right, moving right along. Borgoth 10 is asking, what is your go-to baseball sadness coping mechanism? This typed with Kurterberger in hand. So the Kurterberger is back, by the way, if you are not aware, at Culver's starting this month. So
it's a good one.
Yeah, I've never actually had a Kurterberger. Just seems like too much fried cheese for me. So I guess, when baseball makes you sad, Paul, what do you do?
I'm only sad for about 10 seconds, and it was a weekday, so I couldn't even stay sad that long, because I had stuff to do to get ready for like school the next day and junk. But I will pour out one of my nicer bourbons and do that. So that's pretty much it. I don't even know what I have around here right now, but it's something. But yeah, that's it. I had some like makers that I got for Christmas from my mom that's supposed to be like pastry-ish. I don't know. It's delightful, but yeah, that.
What is the... Yeah, I you should tell me more about what the label on that is.
It's in the trash right now, so I'll see if I can go and get it out.
Yeah, I had the same reaction as he did on Tuesday night. I got home and I didn't eat dinner before the game. I had a big lunch at like 1:00. I got home and I'm like, I need a frozen pizza, and that whole thing ended up going down. So that was not ideal. It definitely was like, oh, wish I hadn't done that by like midnight. But yeah, that was definitely one of the things. This podcast is helping a hell of a lot. It always allows the anger to ebb and to go out. So, especially preparing for it.
I'm glad I could be your therapist for this. That's great.
Hold on. The other one is yelling like crazy on Twitter. That's the other
Wow.
one. Like yelling like crazy on
Sure.
Twitter. That's the other one.
Just tweet through it.
Just
Yep.
tweet through. Oh, on Tuesday. Oh my God. Yes, I did.
All right. Jeremy Nachman asking or saying, maybe I'm in denial, but isn't this the good times to be a Brewers fan? Going 1-8 in playoff games over a 5-season stretch would sound like unthinkable success to my late 90s, early 2000s young adult self. Given that the ceiling for the team for the past half season was a 3 seed and no chance of bye onto the NLDS, kids these days are spoiled, even mine, but maybe I'm just transitioning to old man status. P.S. How much worse would this have been if it had been the Cubs in the opposing dugout instead of Arizona? Holy living bleep.
Yeah.
So, Paul, that'd probably be the only thing worse than this.
Yeah, that
right?
would have been a lot worse. And that's one of the only good things is we had a pretty anonymous opponent. Like, I don't care about Arizona. I'll forget this happened in 3 years. So that's good.
And there were none of them at the game. Like you could look and see the little pockets of Diamondbacks fans, and there were like none of them at the game. There were so few.
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of the golden age, except winning in the regular season doesn't mean as much as it used to either. Like winning the North or the Central, whatever. I'm in football mode now. Screw off. Winning the National League Central is like it's nice, but it's not like winning the American League East or Central or whatever we used to be in on the other side when it mattered a lot more. Like it's different. It was harder, but it was different. So I mean, it's okay, but there's a reason people make fun of you for hanging wild card banners, and that's the reason people make fun of you for hanging wild card banners.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where we're gonna get into this more in just a minute. But it really is a matter of just like perspective and how you look at things. And I think you're right that the perspective on this has changed. So I'm going to get more into that in a minute.
All right, another one from Archduke Aslatam saying, thank you for a great season of podcasts with a win rate greater than 54%. Shout outs to Jerry DePoto. It is 54% win percentage over 10 years. After seeing the performances of Frelick, Weimer, Terang, Perkins, Uribe, and Monasterio, how would you see their future playing out for a player, replacement level player, starter, or future star? Ryan, what do you think there?
Yep, I went and wrote this down. So I would say for Frelick, you're looking at somewhere between a starter and a future star. I don't know that he's going to be a like superstar, but somewhere better, a little bit better than a starter. Weimer, I think more of between, he's probably a platoon player most of the time. I think in some years he'll be a starter. Other years he's a platoon player, but he has sort of secondary skills that make it all work. I think you kind of say the same things about Terang, though the profile is different there, obviously. Kind of somewhere between like probably a starter because the defense has been so good. But not a star. Like you're not talking about a star. And there will be years when the bat is bad. In the years the bat's bad, it'll be lower. So Perkins and Monasterio are probably both. Perkins is probably more of a 4A player. Monasterio is probably more of a replacement level player, though both have the defense to, be like replacement level ish or maybe a little bit better because the floor on them is high enough that way. Uribe, I think, is a future star. I think he's a future closer and a guy that is viewed as one of the best relievers in the game. I think that's coming.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would maybe flip Monasterio and Perkins a little bit. I'm not sure I trust Monasterio to be good ever again. He might be, but yeah, I think he has the most chance to fall off a cliff and be, not actually very good. At least Perkins is an excellent defensive outfielder and will be like a good, not good, but a fourth outfielder or fifth outfielder for a while, if nothing else.
Yeah, the main problem for him on that is that
Can't hit. Yeah.
Well, no, fifth outfielders are just less common than they used to be.
Oh yeah. That
Pure
too.
defensive outfielders, guys who are just really there for their defense, the way that the classic fifth outfielder used to be, that's just not as common anymore because of the way the rosters are structured now.
Yeah.
All right, Price Trojan, another one here saying, I guess I could have asked this in the minor league extra, but I just thought of it today. Is there any prospect in the system that could be a solution for first base, both in the near term or long term? The current put a ham sandwich that can maybe hit there and hopefully get a trade deadline rental way of doing things isn't flipping my switches anymore. I would add third, but hopefully Wilkin keeps progressing as quickly as it seems. So Ryan, any first base possibilities they're looking in the high minors?
Yeah, I've been on the record that I think Tyler Black has the Lyle Overbay / John Olerud starter kit, and I think he can play first base. It's a little bit unconventional because it doesn't have the classic home run power, which that does worry me right now with how this team is structured. Like that's going to be a lot easier thing to do if Brock Wilkin comes up and is mashing 35 homers a year. Like that would really help make that work to have that on the other side. But I think that can work. So I think, yeah, he's the closest thing we have to a first baseman of the future that I can see. Though it also could just be Wilkin if the defense doesn't turn out to be good enough at third base. I'm optimistic it can be good enough for a while, but long term, he probably does play more at first base than he does at third base over the course of his career.
All right. Steve DeRozier, happier question. Please share your favorite Brewers moment from this past season. We all need something enjoyable to think about. I was at the Blake Perkins walk-off game, so I think I would take that one. I think, was that the Angels game? I've been to a couple this year, but that was a fun game that I was at, the Angels game, because I got to see Mike Trout launch a couple home runs, Blake Perkins walk-off was a different day, but regardless, I had a couple of good memories there. So I would go with that. But Paul,
I was not at any good in person, but I will go with Frelick's debut for the one that I remember most and most fondly because it was awesome.
For sure.
Yeah, that's one that's going to stick out. I think you tend to remember the stuff early and late the best. And I think the early memory that's going to stick with people is Bryce Terang's grand slam on opening day, or the home opener, I should say.
Yep.
And then Rowdy Tellez coming in and closing out the division clincher.
Throwing pitches.
Or the playoff clincher, yeah. Those two things are going to stand out. Another one that I think will stand out, depending on if he does turn into the star he looked like in that moment, Joey Wiemer, the Joey Wiemer game. That one will be remembered for a while because that was a wild game. So that one, you guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Was that the one where they were giving mullets away, or
no?
Was the mullet
that was the result. The
one?
mullet thing happened after that because of that.
Okay.
No, it was the game he had 2 home runs, should have had a third. Had like a double in there as well, like just absolutely. And then and also had an insane defensive play, or maybe 2 like insane defensive plays in there. That game was Joey Wiemer's star turn and showed potential. He's gonna have to realize it for that one to really be remembered long term. But if he does, people will talk about that game for a long time.
I just remember you being too chicken to get the mullet. That's all I remember from that.
Yeah, there was some I actually would have done it too because it didn't matter. It was going into summer, so whatever.
Right.
Go get the mullet and then get it shaved off.
Right. All right, Morgoth 10, another one. First, thanks so much, guys, for the content this season. Always a pleasure starting the week with good discussion. The prospect of some fun off-season content is the only thing keeping me going today. Well, glad we can help you out there.
Yeah.
Question is, I can't stop thinking about Ryan's take on how seemingly little value is placed on team regular season accomplishment versus just the postseason. You compared MLB to European sports that do it differently. I don't follow soccer or other examples of this. So what would you change for MLB, or is this purely a mindset thing? or is it purely a mindset thing when it comes to fans, Ryan?
So it's both a mindset thing and also a structure thing. So the way that the EPL is structured, so the top level domestic soccer leagues in Europe, you play every team in the league home and away, and then the team that has the most wins, or the most points out of those games, ends up taking home the title. There is no postseason involved. The league is simply everybody plays everybody home and away, and that's it. And this is actually what baseball started like in this country, believe it or not. That is what it used to be like until the World Series came along and kind of started the whole postseason thing. It used to be that you played everybody the same amount of time, and then the champion was crowned based on how they did in the regular season. They won the pennant. That's where that came from. You're given a pennant. And then, like, in the early days, the World Series was really viewed as like an exhibition. It was like an add-on and a tag-on. In fact, the second World Series or the third World Series, John McGraw simply decided not to play it. And he told his players, we're not going to play him. I'm not going to play those bastards from the American League, because he hated Ban Johnson. So, like, literally was just like, no, we're not going to do that. The NL pennant is what we care about, so we're not even going to do that. So there's that, like, that structure of it. And then there's the thing you have to understand about European soccer is they play multiple competitions a year, and this is coming to the States. I'll get to that in a minute, but they play these different competitions. So besides the league, you could also be playing in a European competition. If you were good in the league the year before, you can qualify to play in Europe, where you're playing for a European trophy. You're playing teams from other countries, and you're trying to win a trophy that way too. Then there's these things called the domestic cups, where you're playing teams from all levels of your association. So you're playing basically early on, you could be playing some like semi-pro teams. So those are super fun. That has kind of like an NCAA tournament vibe to it, where it's like you can have a nothing team upset, an EPL team that's really, really good. So there's these varying levels of competition, and that is coming to the NBA. The NBA is doing a cup this year in the midst of their regular season, and people aren't really talking about it. The NBA heads are talking about it, but like people aren't really talking about it that much yet. And I'm going to be fascinated to watch like what a culture shock it is for Americans. Like, why are you doing this? What is this nonsense? What is this thing? And basically what all of this allows is, because you're playing in potentially up to like 4 competitions in 1 year, what it allows for is like you can win various things. You can be the champion of this thing or that thing, or like in the Premier League, there's also varying levels, because if you finish in the top 4, you get to play in the top European league the next year. If you finish 5th, you get to go to the secondary league. If you finish 6th or 7th, you get to finish in that third league. So there's all these different measures for success, and there's all these ways that like a team can measure and win something and have success. And it's not just one thing that is the be all end all and is the only thing that matters. And I think that this is right on a lot of fronts, because, and I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, when you play 162 games over a regular season, that should mean something. I really think it should mean something more than what a month-long tournament where you're playing between 2 and I think it was like 22 games, if you play a full series every time. Like, I feel like that should mean, like, if you're doing this thing and playing all these games, that should have a strong meaning. And it would be nice if we could do that. I don't know that we can get to that at this point, because historically, that's not how we've done things. I think if you try to institute it now, people would be like, you're handing out a regular season trophy, participation trophy losers, and like whatever. It would be a different thing. If it came up organically over time, I think it would just be better, and people would have a better feel for it. But I think the biggest evidence for this, and why I think this is so important, is look at the players celebrate when they make the playoffs. They're not necessarily celebrating because, I mean, part of it is they're hoping that they are going to get lucky and win the World Series. They're going to go through and have get all the breaks and have it go through and do that. But just playing 162 games and finishing ahead of a bunch of other teams is a victory in and of itself. And the players have gone through such a long, arduous slog through all that time, that they want to celebrate and have fun with it because it was so difficult and so tough for them to do, and it took so much out of them that they feel like that is a thing worth celebrating. And we as fans at this point, in most cases, now if you've had a long playoff drought, that's an exception. Seattle partied like crazy last year. We partied in 2008 like crazy. But for the most part, when teams make the playoffs, it's okay, well, now let's get to the next step. And the making of the playoffs itself, that level of success in the regular season means relatively nothing. And I think that's a shame. And I think it would be nice if we could find ways to make that less true.
Yeah, Americans love playoffs. You're all morons. So, yeah, that's it.
One last question before we go this week. Talking about the playoff formats, I feel like there's been a lot of questions about this just floating around, and not just sour grapes because the Brewers, lost 2 out of 3. Brad Westness asking, this current playoff format with 3 wild cards seems to make divisions basically meaningless in terms of the postseason bracket, incentivizing teams to aim for the about 85 win wild card threshold unless they're enough of a juggernaut to feel confident they'll be the 1 or 2 seed in the league. What would your dream playoff structure look like if you were the commissioner? Paul, let's start with you.
If I was the commissioner?
Yes.
It would probably be like it was in like the 70s and 80s. We would not have this. This is too many baseball teams making a playoff, and not having an actual series of games is ridiculous, which I think is my big first annoyance with it. I actually kind of liked the wild card play-in game, which gave somebody a chance but also punished them heavily for doing it. That's fine, but I think I would have like 4 teams make the playoffs. I am old school like that, and I kind of do prefer that.
Yeah, I think that is the best way to ensure that you're going to have the best team win. It ups the odds that the best team ends up winning the World Series, not just because it's fewer rounds for them to go through and all of that, but also it gives them less of a chance of having somebody just jump up and bite them in a weird situation where they weren't the better team. And we've seen this over and over and over in recent years that, good teams lose to considerably worse teams, and that's because it's just kind of a gauntlet to get through. So that would be, from that perspective, it's good. But I think we also need to recognize that, like, as a fan of a small market team who doesn't have the access to the kind of financing that the big market teams are going to roll out there, it's going to be more difficult for us in this situation, and that part of expanding the playoff fields is a competitive balance measure. There's a competitive balance component to expanding the playoffs and letting more teams in. It makes it more possible for teams in smaller markets with lower payrolls to be able to have success. So you take like the good with the bad on that. Like it cuts both directions.
Just more bites at the apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that, obviously they're not going to take away playoff teams now that there's all this TV money. So I don't know. I saw some people floating around the idea of, I think it's the KBO, where the top seed starts with like a 1-game advantage, right? So like if the Brewers in the scenario, they only would have had to win 1 game, it would not have helped them. But 2 out of 3, but the top seeds starts +1 basically, and they only have to win 1. I don't know. That way it kind of turns it into a de facto, 1-game playoff for the lower seed. And then I don't know, man. It's super easy to feel unfulfilled when your team's on the wrong end of this. I know New York fans felt the same way when the Mets won 100+ games last year and ended up in this game too.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lost to the Padres they're the only team to ever go to 3 games in this. I would look at that too. Like in the 2 years since we've done this, they've all been 2-game sweeps except for that Mets Padres series last year, which is kind of wild too. But I don't know if that's just proof that this doesn't necessarily work, if they're all just 2-game sweeps. We're doing this on a day without baseball because there were no game 3s, right? So I don't know. If anything, Manfred will probably just expand it another one, and we'll have to figure things out again. But I don't know. All right. that'll do it for questions this week. Thank you, everybody. A ton of good questions. Kind of touched on everything we wanted to get to, right, Ryan?
Yeah, we do need to welcome new members, though. So I didn't get those in there in time in the rundown, but we do have a new member to welcome.
Okay, well, we do. So thank you for signing up. I don't see the name right here. I don't have the tab open.
Sorry,
I apologize.
We'll
get to it.
Actually, it says that we have two. I'm not in the normal screen I'm at for this. It's weird. Matt Pickett, but it says I have another one. I'm going to try to figure this out before we completely go away. So we thank Matt Pickett and the other person who we're desperately trying to find right now while we're
Was it
doing
Richard
this.
Proctor, who I have second on the list here?
Is Richard Proctor? Okay, we did thank him last year. Last week. We did thank him last week. So yeah.
So thanks to Matt, and that was not necessarily of you. Matt helped co-host Reporting as Eligible last week.
Oh,
so.
Nice.
go tune in, and you can hear he does the Hey, We Like Your podcast, which features us heavily with some regularity, and has had Matab co-host as well. So thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Is he a baseball guy too?
He is, I think, mostly or entirely a football guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
He did a nice job on the podcast.
Yeah,
Definitely appreciate listening to that.
He's
to that
a
if
pro.
you haven't already. Yeah, for sure.
That just gives away. I haven't listened to it yet. I haven't had time to listen to it yet, so I need to listen to it. I'm behind.
There we go. I usually listen to those on my drives to work, and I've just been sick a day or so this week. So I'm a day behind on my podcast listening, but I'm getting there too. Go check that out wherever you get your podcast. And a reminder, as always, if you're not a patron already, go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate to get that question priority, both for this podcast and for Reporting as Eligible. Definitely going to need them to get those questions in now that we're in full swing in Packer season. We did this big kind of debrief on the playoff series. We're probably going to have to do just kind of a postmortem on the season writ large at some point here, but we're going to take a week off because, we were there just about every week this summer, which I think we're all really proud of, but man, we need a break. We need to kind of reset. We're all getting sick. We've all got plans in October. So we'll join you a couple weeks from now. And, the way things go, because we're planning to do this, that'll be the day that Craig Counsell ends up with the Mets. But if that happens, we'll find a way to do something. But be on the lookout for that. Otherwise, thank you, everybody, for sticking with us through this season and through this long playoff episode. And we will see you here next time on Milwaukee's Tailgate.